The rain poured down on the busy streets of Manhattan as Rebecca wiped her food cart for what felt like the 100th time that day. Her hands were rough and calloused from years of working 18-hour shifts, serving hot dogs and pretzels to anyone who would stop. Most people rushed past without even looking at her. She was invisible to them, just another face in the crowd trying to survive. But Rebecca never complained. She smiled at every customer, no matter how rude they were. She believed that kindness cost nothing, and maybe, just maybe, it would make someone's day a little brighter. Today was different, though. Today, a man in a torn jacket and muddy shoes would change everything. She didn't know it yet, but her life was about to take the most unexpected turn imaginable. The universe was watching, and it was about to reward her in ways she never dreamed possible. Marcus Chen stood across the street, observing the vendor through the rain-soaked window of his limousine. He was worth $8 billion, yet nobody on this street corner would recognize him without his tailored suits and designer watches. For the past 6 months, he'd been searching for something, or rather someone genuine, someone who hadn't been corrupted by greed or materialism. His business empire was crumbling from the inside because everyone around him only cared about money. His own family had betrayed him for inheritance. His friends turned out to be leeches waiting for handouts. Even his fiancée left him when she found someone wealthier. Marcus was done with fake people, and tonight he was conducting the ultimate test. He'd disguised himself as a homeless man, torn his clothes, dirtied his face, and emptied his wallet of everything except a few crumpled dollar bills. "Let's see who you really are," Marcus whispered to himself as he stepped out of the car. His driver looked concerned, but Marcus waved him away with a stern glance. He limped toward Rebecca's cart, hunching his shoulders to appear defeated and broken. Every step was calculated. This was his final test before he made a decision that would affect his entire billion-dollar empire. If he couldn't find one decent person in this city, he was ready to sell everything and disappear forever. The rain intensified as he approached, thunder rumbling overhead like a warning. Other vendors nearby were packing up their carts, eager to escape the storm. But Rebecca stayed, her bright yellow umbrella the only splash of color in the gray evening. Marcus watched as she served a businessman who threw money at her without saying thank you. She still smiled and wished him a good evening. "Excuse me, miss," Marcus croaked, disguising his voice to sound weak and desperate. He approached slowly, making himself appear as pathetic as possible. Rebecca turned and her eyes immediately softened with concern. Most people avoided eye contact with homeless individuals, but she looked right at him, seeing him as a human being. "Could you spare some food? I haven't eaten in 2 days," Marcus continued, letting his voice crack with emotion. He held out 3 crumpled dollar bills, barely enough for a hot dog, let alone a full meal. Rebecca glanced at the money, then at his face, and Marcus saw something remarkable happen. Her expression didn't change to disgust or annoyance, like he'd witnessed with dozens of other vendors during his test. Instead, her eyes filled with genuine compassion, the kind that couldn't be faked or bought. She reached for the largest hot dog without hesitation. "Keep your money," Rebecca said softly, her voice barely audible over the rain. She wrapped the hot dog carefully, adding extra napkins to keep it dry. Then she grabbed a bottle of water and a bag of chips from her own personal stash. Marcus felt his throat tighten. This woman was giving away products she'd have to pay for out of her own pocket. "Here, take this too. You need it more than I do," she added, pushing the food toward him with both hands. Her smile was warm and sincere, not the fake customer service smile he'd seen all evening. Marcus stared at the food, momentarily forgetting he was conducting a test. When was the last time someone had shown him such unconditional kindness? His own mother had sued him for more money just 3 months ago. His brother refused to speak to him unless checks were involved. Yet this stranger was willing to lose money to help someone she'd never see again. "I can't take this without paying," Marcus protested weakly, still playing his role. He wanted to push further, to see how deep her generosity went. Would she change her mind if he became a burden? Would she snap at him like others had? Rebecca shook her head firmly, her wet hair sticking to her face as rain dripped from her umbrella. "Please take it. I know what it's like to be hungry," she said, her voice carrying a weight of lived experience. Something in her eyes told Marcus she wasn't lying. This woman had suffered, yet she chose kindness anyway. "I've been where you are, living on the streets, wondering where my next meal would come from. Someone helped me back then, and now it's my turn to help you," Rebecca explained, her hands trembling slightly as she held out the food. Marcus took it slowly, watching her face for any sign of regret or hesitation. There was none. "God bless you, miss," Marcus said, his voice genuinely emotional now. He wasn't acting anymore. He was truly moved by this encounter. Rebecca smiled wider and nodded, turning back to organize her cart as other customers approached. Marcus stepped aside but didn't leave. He stood under a nearby awning, pretending to eat while watching her serve everyone with the same patience and kindness. A teenager threw change on the counter and demanded faster service. Rebecca apologized and worked quicker. An elderly woman fumbled with her purse. Rebecca waited patiently and even helped count the coins. A drunk man stumbled toward her cart, making inappropriate comments. Rebecca handled it with grace and humor, diffusing the situation without calling for help. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to his assistant. "Found her. Run a complete background check. I need everything by morning." Tonight had proven what he suspected. Genuine people still existed in this world. As the evening grew darker, Rebecca's sales slowed to a trickle. Marcus watched as she counted her earnings with a worried expression. She was coming up short, probably because she'd given away free food to him and possibly others before him. He saw her shoulders slump momentarily before she straightened up and smiled again, refusing to let circumstances defeat her spirit. She began packing her cart slowly, clearly exhausted from the long day. Marcus noticed her worn-out shoes had holes in them, and her jacket was too thin for the cold rain. Yet she'd given away food without hesitation. His phone buzzed with a preliminary report from his assistant. Rebecca Martinez, age 32, single mother of 2, worked 3 jobs to support her kids and elderly mother. No criminal record. Excellent credit despite minimal income. Volunteered at homeless shelters on weekends. This woman was exactly what he'd been searching for. Someone with character, integrity, and a heart of gold. Marcus made his decision right there on that rainy street corner. He walked back toward Rebecca's cart, still maintaining his homeless disguise. She looked up, and her face brightened when she recognized him. "Did you need more food?" she asked immediately, already reaching for her supplies. Marcus shook his head and smiled, his first genuine smile in months. "No, I need to tell you something," he said, dropping his disguised voice and speaking normally. Rebecca's expression shifted to confusion as she noticed the change in his demeanor. "I'm not who you think I am. My name is Marcus Chen, and I'm the CEO of Chen Industries," he revealed, watching shock spread across her face. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked around as if expecting cameras or a prank show. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her his driver's license and business card. "I've been testing people across the city for 6 months, looking for someone genuine. You passed." Rebecca stumbled backward, gripping her cart for support as the reality of the situation hit her. Her mind raced through the implications. Was this real? Was she dreaming? The billionaire Marcus Chen, whose face appeared on business magazines and news channels, had been standing in front of her cart disguised as a homeless man? "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Why would you do that? Why would someone like you test people like that?" Marcus smiled sadly and gestured to the empty street around them. "Because everyone in my life has disappointed me, Rebecca. Everyone wants something from me. Money, connections, fame. But you gave without expecting anything in return. You saw a human being in need and helped without judgment or hesitation," he explained, his voice thick with emotion. "Tomorrow morning I want you to come to my office. I'm about to offer you an opportunity that will change your life forever. But I need you to trust me, just like I'm choosing to trust you." Rebecca's legs felt weak as tears streamed down her face, mixing with the rain that continued to fall around them. Rebecca barely slept that night. She lay in her tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling while her 2 children slept peacefully in the next room. Was it all real? Had a billionaire really approached her cart and offered to change her life? She picked up the business card Marcus had given her, embossed gold lettering on premium cardstock that probably cost more than her weekly groceries. Her hands trembled as she traced the letters of his name. Part of her wanted to believe it was a cruel joke, some internet prank that would humiliate her online. But the way Marcus had looked at her, the emotion in his voice that couldn't be faked. She'd spent years reading people's faces at her cart, developing an instinct for dishonesty. Marcus had been genuine. At 5 in the morning, Rebecca gave up on sleep and started getting ready. She had only one decent outfit, a simple black dress she wore to church and job interviews. It would have to do. The Chen Industries headquarters towered 53 stories above the Manhattan skyline, its glass facade reflecting the morning sun like a beacon of power and wealth. Rebecca stood on the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top, feeling impossibly small. People in expensive suits rushed past her, speaking into wireless earpieces about deals worth millions. She clutched her worn purse tighter and took a deep breath. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, remembering her grandmother's words. "Stand tall, Mija. You're worth just as much as anyone else." Rebecca pushed through the revolving doors into a lobby that looked like something from a science fiction movie. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, a waterfall feature cascading down one entire wall, and a reception desk that seemed to stretch for miles. Security guards eyed her suspiciously. She clearly didn't belong here. Before they could question her, a woman in a sharp red suit approached with a warm smile. "Rebecca Martinez?" the woman asked, extending her hand professionally. "I'm Sarah Chen, Marcus's sister and the company's chief operating officer. My brother told me to expect you. Please follow me." Rebecca shook her hand, noticing how soft and manicured it was compared to her own work-worn fingers. Sarah led her past security to a private elevator that required a fingerprint scan to operate. As they ascended, Rebecca's ears popped from the rapid change in altitude. Sarah made pleasant small talk, asking about her children and complimenting her courage for coming, but Rebecca barely heard the words. Her mind was racing with possibilities and fears. What did Marcus want from her? What kind of opportunity required meeting in a billionaire's office? The elevator doors opened directly into a penthouse suite that served as Marcus's personal office. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of the entire city. Rebecca gasped audibly. Marcus stood by the window, this time dressed in an immaculate navy suit that probably cost more than her car. He turned when they entered, and his face broke into a genuine smile, the same smile he'd given her last night in the rain. "Rebecca, thank you for coming. I know this must be overwhelming," he said, gesturing to a seating area with leather couches that looked more comfortable than her bed. Sarah excused herself quietly, leaving them alone. Rebecca sat carefully, afraid she might damage something expensive. Marcus sat across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees, making himself less intimidating. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I believe you deserve honesty. I didn't just test you randomly last night. I've been searching for someone like you for a very specific reason," he began, his dark eyes serious and intense. Rebecca's heart pounded so hard she was sure he could hear it. "My company is worth $8 billion, but it's built on a foundation that's crumbling," Marcus continued, his voice heavy with disappointment. "I have 3,000 employees, and I don't trust a single one of them anymore. My executive team has been embezzling funds for years. I just discovered it last month. My board members leak confidential information to competitors for bribes. My own family has tried to have me declared mentally incompetent so they can seize control of my assets. Everyone around me sees dollar signs instead of a human being." He paused, running his hand through his hair in frustration. Rebecca listened in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the scale of betrayal he was describing. "I'm restructuring everything from the ground up, and I need people I can trust in key positions. Not people with MBA degrees and corporate experience. I'm done with those types. I need people with character, integrity, and genuine hearts. People like you, Rebecca." Rebecca found her voice finally, though it came out shakier than she intended. Mr. Chen, I appreciate what you're saying, but I'm a street vendor. I didn't even finish college. I have no experience running anything except a hot dog cart. What could I possibly offer a company like this? Marcus smiled and shook his head, as if he'd expected that exact response. You offer something more valuable than any degree or certification. You offer authenticity. You showed compassion to a stranger when you had every reason not to. You gave away food that would cost you money you clearly couldn't afford to lose. You worked in the rain while other vendors went home. That's the kind of employee I need. That's the kind of person I want representing my company, he explained passionately. He stood and walked to his desk, returning with a folder containing several documents. I'm offering you a position as a community outreach director. You'll oversee all of our charitable initiatives and employee wellness programs. Rebecca's hands shook as she opened the folder and saw the salary offer. Her vision blurred with tears. It was more money than she'd made in the last 5 years combined. This can't be real, she whispered, looking up at Marcus with disbelief written across her face. This is more money than I've ever imagined earning. Why would you trust me with something so important? You barely know me. Marcus sat back down, his expression softening with understanding. I know enough. I had my team run a complete background check. I hope you'll forgive the invasion of privacy, but I had to be thorough. You work 3 jobs to support your kids and mother. You volunteer at homeless shelters despite having no free time. You've never missed a rent payment even when you had to choose between food and electricity. You returned a wallet you found with $3,000 in it when you were behind on bills. Your character speaks louder than any resume ever could. But what if I fail? Rebecca asked, voicing the fear that was screaming in her mind. What if I'm not smart enough or capable enough? What if I let you down? She thought about her children, about the stability this job could provide them. The weight of the opportunity was crushing and exhilarating at the same time. Marcus leaned back and crossed his arms, studying her with an amused expression. Do you know what every single person I've interviewed for executive positions over the past 10 years has said? They've told me how brilliant they are, how they're the best candidate, how lucky I'd be to hire them. Not one of them worried about failing or letting me down. You're already better than all of them because you care about doing the job right, not just collecting a paycheck, he said firmly. I'm not expecting perfection, Rebecca. I'm expecting effort, honesty, and heart. Can you give me those 3 things? Rebecca felt tears streaming down her cheeks as the reality of the moment overwhelmed her completely. This was really happening. A billionaire was offering her a life-changing opportunity because she'd given a hot dog to someone she thought was homeless. Years of struggle, of working until her hands bled, of skipping meals so her kids could eat. All of it had led to this impossible moment. Yes, she managed to say, her voice breaking with emotion. Yes, I can give you effort, honesty, and heart. I promise you won't regret this, Mr. Chen. I'll work harder than anyone you've ever hired. I'll make you proud. Marcus smiled and extended his hand across the coffee table. Call me Marcus. And I already am proud. You're proof that good people still exist in this world. Now let's get you set up with HR. You start tomorrow, and trust me, you're about to discover that your journey is just beginning. As Sarah returned to escort Rebecca to the Human Resources Department, Marcus watched from his window as the woman who'd sold hot dogs yesterday walked through his headquarters as an executive today. His phone buzzed with messages from board members demanding meetings, from lawyers warning about his restructuring plans, from family members threatening lawsuits. He ignored them all. For the first time in years, Marcus felt something he'd almost forgotten: hope. Hope that he could rebuild his empire with people who valued integrity over profits. Hope that kindness wasn't extinct in the modern world. Hope that his gamble on a street vendor would pay dividends no stock market could match. Rebecca disappeared into the elevator, and Marcus turned back to his desk, where photographs of his parents smiled at him from silver frames. I'm going to fix this, Dad, he whispered to the picture. I'm going to build the company you dreamed of, one good person at a time. Rebecca's first day at Chen Industries felt like entering an alien world. She sat in her new office, an actual office with her name on the door, staring at the computer screen that displayed more programs than she knew existed. The desk was real mahogany, the chair ergonomic leather that adjusted 12 different ways, and the view overlooked Central Park. Yesterday she'd been serving hot dogs in the rain. Today she had an assistant named Jennifer who brought her coffee and asked about her schedule preferences. Jennifer was patient and kind, explaining company systems without any condescension, but Rebecca still felt like an imposter. What was she doing here? Everyone else wore designer clothes and spoke confidently about quarterly projections and stakeholder meetings. She was a high school graduate who'd learned business from managing a food cart. The anxiety threatened to choke her until she remembered Marcus's words: effort, honesty, and heart. Though she could deliver, even if she didn't understand corporate jargon yet. Her first meeting was at 10 o'clock, a department overview with the outgoing community outreach director, a man named Gregory Hamilton, who'd held the position for 15 years. Rebecca entered the conference room to find Gregory waiting with the expression that made her stomach drop. He looked her up and down with barely concealed contempt, his lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "So you're Marcus's little charity case," Gregory said coldly, not bothering with introductions or handshakes. "Let me guess. You met him at some gala, flattered his ego, and now you're here to play executive for a few months before reality hits?" Rebecca felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd dealt with rude customers for years. This was just another bully in a nicer suit. "I'm here because Mr. Chen believes I can do this job." "I'd appreciate your help with the transition," she replied evenly, taking a seat at the conference table with more confidence than she felt. Gregory laughed bitterly and tossed a stack of folders across the table toward her, papers scattered everywhere, some falling to the floor. "Here's 15 years of work, sweetheart. Donor lists, program budgets, compliance reports, grant applications, everything you'll need to understand. Of course, that assumes you can actually read financial documents, which I seriously doubt." He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, enjoying her discomfort. Rebecca bent down to gather the fallen papers, her hands trembling with suppressed rage. She'd experienced condescension her whole life, from customers who treated her like she was invisible, from landlords who assumed she'd miss rent, from her children's teachers who looked down on her for working multiple jobs. But this felt different because she was supposed to belong here now. Marcus had given her this opportunity, and people like Gregory were determined to make her fail. She straightened up, met his eyes directly, and made a decision that would define her future at the company. "You're right, Gregory. I can't read corporate financial documents yet," Rebecca said firmly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I don't know the jargon, the systems, or the procedures, but I know people. I know what it's like to be invisible, to be dismissed, to work until your body breaks and still worry about feeding your family. That's who this outreach program should serve, and I'm betting I understand them better than you ever could." Gregory's smirk faltered slightly as she continued. "You can either help me learn what I need to know and be part of something meaningful, or you can keep treating me like I'm beneath you, but I'm not going anywhere. Marcus believes in me, and I'm not going to let him down, just because you've decided I'm not worthy of being here." The room fell silent. Gregory stared at her with a mixture of shock and grudging respect. Nobody had spoken to him like that in years. Most new employees cowered under his intimidation tactics. "Fine," Gregory finally said, his tone slightly less hostile. "Meet me here tomorrow at 8. Bring coffee. You'll need it. We have 6 active programs, 14 corporate partnerships, and an annual budget of $12 million to review. If you're serious about this, I'll teach you, but don't expect me to hold your hand or pretend you're qualified just because Marcus is playing savior." He stood abruptly and walked toward the door, pausing before leaving. "And for the record, I've seen 5 people sit in your chair in the past decade. They all had impressive degrees and relevant experience. They all failed within a year because they treated this like a stepping stone to something better. If you actually care about the communities we serve instead of just climbing the corporate ladder, you might surprise me." With that, he left, leaving Rebecca alone with 15 years of documentation and a spark of hope. Maybe, just maybe, She could win people over by proving herself rather than demanding respect she hadn't earned. The rest of the day was a whirlwind of introductions, system logins, and orientation sessions that made Rebecca's head spin. She met dozens of employees whose names immediately left her memory, signed paperwork she barely understood, and received an employee handbook thicker than a phone book. By 4 in the afternoon, her feet hurt from the new dress shoes she'd bought that morning, nowhere near as comfortable as her worn sneakers. She missed her cart, missed the simplicity of her old life, missed knowing exactly what she was supposed to do every minute of the day. But then Sarah Chen stopped by her office with a warm smile and an invitation to join the executive team for their weekly dinner. It's casual, just a chance for the leadership team to decompress and connect as humans instead of colleagues, Sarah explained. Marcus specifically wants you there. He thinks you'll bring a fresh perspective to our discussions. Rebecca wanted to refuse, wanted to go home and hug her children, but she recognized an opportunity when she saw one. The restaurant was the kind of place Rebecca had only seen in movies. Dim lighting, tables spaced far apart for privacy, waiters in bow ties who probably earned more than she used to make in a week. Marcus was already there with 5 other executives, laughing at something someone had said. He waved Rebecca over enthusiastically, standing to pull out her chair personally. Everyone, this is Rebecca Martinez, our new Community Outreach Director. Rebecca, meet the team that's going to help us rebuild this company's soul, Marcus said with genuine warmth. The introductions went by in a blur. Chief Financial Officer, Head of Operations, Chief Technology Officer, and others whose titles she'd forget by morning. But what struck Rebecca was how normal they seemed. They asked about her children, her transition, her first impressions of the company. Nobody mentioned her lack of credentials or questioned her right to be there. Either Marcus had coached them carefully, or these were the good people he'd been recruiting to replace the corrupt executives he'd fired. Dinner conversation flowed naturally from business topics to personal stories, and Rebecca found herself relaxing despite her intimidating surroundings. The CFO, a woman named Patricia, shared how she'd grown up in poverty and worked her way through state college while supporting 3 younger siblings. The CTO, David, talked about being rejected from dozens of jobs because of his stutter until Marcus hired him based on his work rather than his interview performance. Each person at the table had a story of struggle, of overcoming obstacles, of choosing integrity over shortcuts. Rebecca realized Marcus hadn't just hired her. He was systematically building a leadership team of people who understood hardship and valued character. When the conversation turned to her, Rebecca shared honestly about her years as a vendor, the customers who'd changed her perspective on humanity, and the night Marcus had approached her cart. Everyone listened intently, and several people had tears in their eyes by the time she finished. "That's why we're here," Patricia said softly. Marcus is giving people like us a chance to prove that decency and success aren't mutually exclusive. As the evening wound down and executives began saying their goodbyes, Marcus asked Rebecca to stay for a few more minutes. They moved to the restaurant's outdoor terrace, where the city lights sparkled below like a field of stars. "How was your first day?" Marcus asked, his tone genuinely interested. Rebecca laughed and shook her head. "Overwhelming, terrifying, and exciting all at once. I met Gregory Hamilton. I think he hates me. But I also met your sister and the leadership team, and I'm starting to understand what you're building here." Marcus nodded knowingly. "Gregory doesn't hate you. He hates change. He's been coasting for years, doing the bare minimum while collecting a substantial salary. You threaten his comfortable existence because you actually care. Give him time, prove yourself through action, and he'll come around. And if he doesn't, well, I'll deal with that problem." He turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "Rebecca, I need you to promise me something. Don't let the corporate world change who you are. Don't let people like Gregory make you doubt yourself or compromise your values." "I promise," Rebecca said, meaning it with every fiber of her being. She looked out at the city below, thinking about how far she'd come in just 24 hours. Somewhere out there, another street vendor was probably closing their cart. exhausted and worried about making ends meet, just like she'd been yesterday. The thought made her more determined than ever to succeed in this role. If she could make it, if she could prove that kindness and hard work mattered more than pedigree and connections, maybe she could inspire others who felt invisible and worthless. Marcus, thank you for seeing me when everyone else looked right through me. I won't let you down, she said quietly. Marcus smiled and raised his water glass in a toast. To new beginnings and the belief that good people still exist in this world. You didn't let me down last night in the rain, Rebecca. You reminded me why I built this company in the first place. To make a difference, not just make money. 3 weeks into her new position, Rebecca was drowning in spreadsheets, donor reports, and compliance regulations she barely understood. She arrived at the office at 6 every morning and left at 8 every night, trying desperately to catch up to colleagues who'd spent decades in corporate environments. Her children complained they never saw her anymore. Her mother worried she was working herself to death again. Gregory grudgingly provided training sessions, testing her constantly with obscure questions and complex scenarios, but Rebecca refused to quit. She studied grant proposals on the subway, watched YouTube tutorials on financial analysis after her kids went to bed, and called Patricia late at night with questions about budget reconciliation. Slowly, painfully, the corporate world began making sense. She started recognizing patterns in the data, understanding the strategic thinking behind program decisions, and identifying inefficiencies that 15-year veterans had overlooked. Her outsider perspective became an unexpected advantage because she questioned everything that experienced employees simply accepted as normal. Her breakthrough came during a department meeting about the company's annual charity gala, a black-tie event that raised millions for various causes but cost nearly $1 million to produce. Gregory presented the same format they'd used for 12 consecutive years. Rent an exclusive ballroom, hire a celebrity host, serve a 10-course meal, and auction luxury items to wealthy donors who attended more for networking than charity. Rebecca listened quietly, reviewing the financial reports that showed diminishing returns year after year. Fewer attendees, less enthusiastic bidding, declining media coverage. The event had become a predictable routine that excited nobody, but still consumed massive resources. When Gregory finished his presentation and asked for questions, Rebecca raised her hand hesitantly. I have a suggestion, but I'm still learning, so please tell me if this is completely wrong, she began, aware that 12 sets of eyes were now focused on her with varying degrees of skepticism. Gregory sighed dramatically but nodded for her to continue. What if we cancelled the gala entirely and used that $1 million budget to directly serve the communities we claim to help? Rebecca proposed, her voice gaining confidence as she warmed to her idea. Instead of serving wealthy donors expensive meals they don't need, we could organize a massive community festival, free food, free healthcare screenings, job training workshops, entertainment resources. We could invite the media to cover real impact instead of just rich people in fancy dresses. We could ask our usual donors to sponsor specific programs, feed 500 families, provide medical care for 1,000 people, fund job training for 200 unemployed workers, give them tangible results instead of auction paddles and rubber chicken dinners. The conference room erupted in overlapping voices. Some executives immediately dismissed the idea as naive and impractical. Others leaned forward with interest, intrigued by the radical departure from tradition. Gregory's face turned red with barely controlled anger. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, he snapped. You clearly don't understand how major donor relationships work. Marcus, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner observing the meeting, suddenly spoke up. Actually, Gregory, I think Rebecca might be onto something. Continue, Rebecca. I want to hear the full proposal. His endorsement silenced the room immediately, and Rebecca felt a surge of gratitude mixed with terror. She was really doing this, challenging 15 years of established practice in her 4th week on the job. Our donor data shows that wealthy contributors are aging out and younger philanthropists aren't replacing them at the same rate, Rebecca explained, pulling up statistics she'd memorized from late-night study sessions. Millennials and Gen Z donors want transparency and impact, not social events. They want to see exactly where their money goes and what difference it makes. A community festival would generate social media content, demonstrate real results, and attract a new generation of donors who care more about purpose than prestige. She showed photos on her laptop of similar events other companies had organized, festivals that generated millions in donations while costing a fraction of traditional galas. We could even live stream the event, reaching thousands online who'd never attend a formal dinner. The debate continued for an hour, with the room splitting into two camps: traditionalists who believed Rebecca's inexperience was showing, and innovators who recognized an opportunity to revolutionize their approach. Marcus listened to all arguments carefully, but kept returning his attention to Rebecca, asking probing questions that forced her to defend every aspect of her proposal. She stumbled occasionally, admitting when she didn't have answers, but her passion and preparation impressed even her harshest critics. Finally, Marcus stood and addressed the room with the authority that commanded instant silence. "We're going to do this. Rebecca, you have 4 months to plan and execute this festival. Gregory, you'll provide all necessary resources and historical data to support her. If this succeeds, it becomes our new model. If it fails, we'll evaluate what went wrong and adjust accordingly. But I didn't hire Rebecca to maintain the status quo. I hired her to challenge it." Meeting adjourned. He walked out before anyone could protest, leaving Rebecca simultaneously thrilled and terrified by the enormous responsibility he'd just placed on her shoulders. Gregory cornered her immediately after the meeting, his face still flushed with anger and wounded pride. "You just made a huge mistake," he hissed, keeping his voice low so others wouldn't hear. "You embarrassed me in front of the entire department by suggesting my gala format is obsolete. You've been here less than a month and you think you know better than people who've done this work for decades? This festival idea will crash and burn spectacularly, and when it does, Marcus will realize hiring you was a publicity stunt that backfired. I almost hope it happens just so I can watch you fail." Rebecca felt her stomach twist with anxiety, but she refused to show weakness or back down. "Gregory, I wasn't trying to embarrass you. I was trying to solve a problem that your own data clearly shows. Donor engagement is declining and costs are rising. If you genuinely care about our mission instead of protecting your ego, you'd help me make this work. We could do this together, or you can sabotage it and prove you care more about being right than making a difference." She walked away before he could respond, her hands shaking from the confrontation. That night, Rebecca sat at her kitchen table surrounded by papers, her children finally asleep, and her mother watching television in the living room. She'd just taken on a project that could make or break her entire career, challenged a senior executive in front of the whole department, and committed to delivering results in 4 months. What had she been thinking? She wasn't an event planner or fundraising expert. She was a former hot dog vendor who'd gotten incredibly lucky. Doubt crept in like a cold fog, whispering that Gregory was right and she'd fail spectacularly. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Marcus. "I know you're doubting yourself right now. Don't. You saw a problem everyone else accepted as unchangeable, and you proposed a solution. That's exactly why I hired you. You have my full support. Call me if you need anything, anytime." Rebecca felt tears sting her eyes as she reread the message 3 times. Someone believed in her. Someone powerful and successful who didn't have to care but chose to anyway. She wiped her eyes, opened her laptop, and started creating a detailed project plan. Sleep could wait. She had a festival to organize and critics to prove wrong. The next morning, Rebecca arrived at the office to find an unexpected ally waiting outside her door. Patricia, the chief financial officer, stood holding 2 coffees and a warm smile. "I heard about yesterday's meeting. I wanted to offer my help with budget planning and sponsor outreach. What you proposed took guts, and I respect that," Patricia said, handing Rebecca one of the coffees. Over the next hour, Patricia shared insights about donor psychology, budget allocation strategies, and corporate partnership negotiation that Rebecca never would have learned from textbooks or training sessions. The old guard, like Gregory, hate change because it threatens their relevance, Patricia explained candidly. But Marcus is purging the company of people who prioritize their comfort over the mission. You're either going to be part of the new Chen Industries, or you're going to be shown the door. Gregory hasn't figured that out yet. She pulled out her phone and started adding Rebecca to group chats and email lists filled with other reform-minded employees who shared their vision. You're not alone in this. There's a whole network of us who want to see this company become what it was always meant to be. Armed with Patricia's guidance and a growing network of supporters, Rebecca threw herself into festival planning with the same intensity she'd once devoted to surviving on the streets. She worked with city officials to secure permits for a park venue. She reached out to healthcare providers about offering free screenings and services. She contacted food vendors, many of whom she knew personally from her years working the streets, about donating or selling at cost. She recruited volunteers from homeless shelters where she'd served, giving them opportunities to earn income or gain work experience. Every decision was strategic, every dollar accounted for, every detail obsessively planned. She created a social media campaign showcasing the real people who'd benefit from the event, telling their stories with the same authenticity she'd shown Marcus that rainy night. Donations started trickling in from unexpected sources, small business owners, online communities, even some of the company's younger employees who loved the transparent approach. The festival was becoming real, and momentum was building faster than Rebecca had dared to hope. But with success came increased scrutiny and resistance from those who wanted her to fail. Anonymous emails circulated questioning her qualifications and suggesting the festival was a waste of company resources. Gregory's allies in other departments accidentally created scheduling conflicts, delayed approvals, and misplaced important documents. Someone leaked an early budget draft to a business blogger who wrote a scathing article titled "Billionaire's Pet Project: When Good Intentions Meet Bad Management." Rebecca read the article on her phone during her subway commute, feeling each word like a physical blow. The writer called her unqualified, naive, and accused Marcus of tokenism, hiring a poor person for publicity rather than genuine belief in her abilities. Comments below the article were even worse, with strangers dissecting her life and questioning whether she'd slept her way into the position. Rebecca's hands trembled as she read the vitriol, and for the first time since accepting Marcus's offer, she seriously considered quitting. Maybe everyone was right. Maybe she didn't belong in this world after all. Rebecca sat in her office staring at the malicious article on her screen, tears streaming down her face as doubt consumed her completely. She'd worked so hard, sacrificed time with her children, pushed herself beyond every limit. And for what? To be publicly humiliated and called a charity case by people who'd never struggled a day in their lives? Her phone rang, and she almost ignored it until she saw Marcus's name on the screen. "I saw the article," he said immediately, his voice tight with controlled anger. "I'm having our legal team investigate who leaked that budget draft. This was sabotage, Rebecca, not failure. Do you understand the difference?" Rebecca tried to respond but couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Marcus continued gently, "I'm coming to your office. Don't make any decisions until we talk, please." He hung up before she could protest. 10 minutes later, he walked through her door, closed it behind him, and sat across from her desk with an expression of fierce determination. "Tell me the truth. Do you want to quit?" "I don't know anymore," Rebecca admitted, her voice breaking. "Maybe everyone's right. Maybe I'm not qualified for this. Maybe I was foolish to think someone like me could succeed in a world like this. That article says I'm tokenism, that you hired me for publicity. What if they're right? What if I'm just embarrassing you and the company by being here?" Marcus leaned forward, his eyes intense and unwavering. "Rebecca, listen to me very carefully. I've built an $8 billion empire from nothing. I've negotiated with presidents and CEOs, survived hostile takeovers and market crashes. In all those years, do you really think I'd risk my company's reputation on a publicity stunt? Do you honestly believe I'd put you in charge of $1 million initiative if I thought you'd fail?" His words cut through her despair like sunlight, breaking through storm clouds. She looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time since he'd entered. "Then why does everyone keep trying to make me fail?" she whispered. "Because you represent change, and change terrifies people who benefit from the current system," Marcus explained, his voice passionate and convincing. "Gregory and his allies have spent decades building comfortable careers where they do minimal work for maximum pay. You threaten that because you actually care about results instead of just collecting paychecks. The person who leaked that document wants you gone before you expose how little they've actually accomplished over the years. That article wasn't written because you're unqualified. It was written because you're succeeding, despite everyone's predictions that you'd fail immediately." He pulled out his phone and showed her something that made Rebecca's breath catch. It was a counter-article published an hour ago by a major business magazine titled "Corporate Courage: How Chen Industries is Revolutionizing Philanthropy." The writer praised Marcus's unconventional hiring practices and highlighted Rebecca's innovative approach as exactly what modern companies needed. The comment section overflowed with support from people who were tired of traditional corporate elitism. "How did this happen?" Rebecca asked, reading through the positive article with disbelief. Marcus smiled and shrugged. "I didn't arrange it, if that's what you're asking. A journalist reached out to me about the negative article. I gave her the full story, including your background and vision, and she wrote what she genuinely believed. The truth is compelling, Rebecca. You just have to trust it." He stood and walked to her window, looking out over the city below. "I've learned something important over the past month, watching you work. Credentials and experience matter less than I thought. Heart and determination matter more than I ever imagined. You've worked harder than executives making 3 times your salary. You've learned faster than people with MBA degrees. You've shown more creativity than consultants I've paid millions for advice. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish planning this festival, prove all the doubters wrong, and help me transform this company into something we can both be proud of." His confidence was infectious, and Rebecca felt her resolve strengthening with every word. "Okay," she said firmly, wiping away her tears and straightening her shoulders. "You're right, I'm not quitting. I'm going to make this festival the best event this company has ever produced, and everyone who's trying to sabotage me can watch me succeed." Marcus grinned with genuine pride and satisfaction. "There's the fighter I hired. Now, I'm assigning you additional resources, a dedicated team of 5 employees handpicked from departments across the company. They're all people I trust who share your values. Patricia is allocating discretionary budget for unexpected expenses, and Sarah is working with our PR department to counter any future negative press. You're not alone in this, Rebecca. You've never been alone." He headed toward the door, but paused before leaving, turning back with a serious expression. "One more thing. The real test isn't whether the festival succeeds or fails. The real test is whether you maintain your integrity throughout the process. Don't let the corporate world corrupt the kindness I saw that night in the rain. That's more valuable than any event could ever be." With renewed determination and a team of genuine supporters, Rebecca attacked the festival planning with strategic precision. She held daily coordination meetings, created detailed contingency plans, and personally reached out to every stakeholder to ensure alignment and commitment. Her hand-picked team was extraordinary. A logistics coordinator who'd grown up in foster care, a marketing specialist who'd been homeless at 17, a volunteer manager who'd overcome addiction, an operations expert who'd worked 3 jobs while raising disabled siblings, and a finance analyst who'd pulled herself out of generational poverty. Each person understood the mission on a visceral level because they'd lived the struggles their festival aimed to address. They worked 16-hour days not for promotions or bonuses, but because they genuinely believed in creating something meaningful. The team dynamic was unlike anything Rebecca had experienced. No ego battles, no backstabbing, no corporate politics. Just 5 people united by shared values and a common goal to prove that compassion and competence could coexist in the business world. 2 months before the festival, Rebecca organized a preview event for major donors, giving them an advance look at what their contributions would fund. Instead of a formal presentation in a conference room, she took 20 of the company's biggest supporters on a walking tour of the communities they claim to serve. She showed them the homeless shelter where families lived in cramped conditions with inadequate resources. She introduced them to the food bank that ran out of supplies every month by the third week. She walked them through neighborhoods where unemployment topped 40% and opportunities were non-existent. Many donors had never seen poverty up close. They'd written checks from comfortable offices and attended charity galas in expensive ballrooms, but they'd never actually witnessed the human cost of the problems they funded. Several were visibly shaken. One wealthy businessman broke down crying when a 7-year-old girl showed him the single meal she'd eaten that day. "I had no idea," he kept repeating. "I've donated for years, but I never really understood." Rebecca's gamble was working. She was creating emotional connections that would inspire deeper commitment than any auction ever could. The tour ended at the proposed festival site, where Rebecca had created a visual mock-up of what the event would look like. She'd brought in samples of the free food that would be served, set up demonstration booths showing the medical screenings and job training workshops, and invited actual community members to share their stories directly with donors. A single mother explained how job training could mean the difference between keeping or losing her children to the system. A veteran described how free healthcare screenings had diagnosed his diabetes before it became life-threatening. A teenager talked about how mentorship programs had kept him off the streets and on track to graduate high school. By the end of the presentations, Rebecca didn't need to ask for money. Donors were practically throwing funding at the project. One real estate developer committed $500,000 on the spot. A tech CEO pledged to match all other donations up to $1 million. A retired banker with tears in her eyes promised to volunteer personally at every future event. Rebecca's unconventional approach had accomplished what traditional galas never could. It made wealthy donors care about the cause beyond writing tax-deductible checks. The success of the preview event sent shockwaves through Chen Industries and generated unexpected media coverage. Local news stations aired stories about the innovative approach to corporate philanthropy. Business podcasts interviewed Rebecca about her strategy and vision. Social media exploded with praise from people who were tired of performative charity and hungry for authentic impact. Overnight, Rebecca went from being dismissed as Marcus's charity case to being recognized as a legitimate innovator in the corporate social responsibility space. Speaking invitations poured in from other companies wanting to learn from her approach. Harvard Business School requested a case study interview about her methods. Even Gregory, who'd opposed her from day one, grudgingly admitted in a department meeting that preliminary results exceeded his expectations. "I still think traditional galas have value," he said stiffly, "but I acknowledge that Rebecca's approach is resonating with donors in ways I didn't anticipate. She's proven herself more capable than I initially believed." It wasn't a warm endorsement, but coming from Gregory, it was practically a standing ovation. But success brought new pressures that Rebecca hadn't anticipated. With less than 2 months until the festival, she was juggling hundreds of moving pieces: vendor contracts, volunteer coordination, celebrity appearances, media scheduling, security planning, contingency protocols, and endless unexpected crises. A major food supplier backed out at the last minute, forcing Rebecca to negotiate emergency replacements. Weather forecasts predicted potential rain, requiring expensive tent rentals she hadn't budgeted for. A competing charity event scheduled itself on the same day, threatening to split volunteer resources and media attention. Rebecca worked through exhaustion, skipped meals, and slept maybe 4 hours a night if she was lucky. Her children complained they never saw her anymore. Her mother warned that she was heading toward burnout. Even her supportive team worried she was pushing too hard and sacrificing too much. One night, Patricia found Rebecca asleep at her desk at 2 a.m, surrounded by papers and an empty coffee cup. "You're going to collapse if you keep this up," Patricia said gently, shaking her awake. The festival won't matter if you're in the hospital when it happens. You need rest, Rebecca. That's not weakness. It's wisdom. Patricia's words hit Rebecca harder than she expected, and she realized her mentor was absolutely right. She'd been so focused on proving herself worthy of Marcus's faith that she'd forgotten the very lessons that got her here. Balance, self-care, and recognizing when to ask for help. You're right, Rebecca admitted, rubbing her exhausted eyes. I've been trying to do everything myself because I'm afraid that delegating means I'm not pulling my weight. Everyone's watching to see if I fail, and I thought working myself to death was the only way to ensure success. Patricia sat down and fixed Rebecca with a knowing look that carried years of hard-won wisdom. That's exactly the mentality that destroys talented people in corporate environments. You're not alone anymore, Rebecca. You have a team specifically assigned to support you. You have executives who believe in your vision. You have resources that most directors would kill for. Stop acting like you're still pushing that food cart by yourself in the rain. Let people help you. That's not weakness. That's leadership. The words resonated deeply, and Rebecca made a decision that would change her approach to the final stretch before the festival. The next morning, Rebecca called an emergency team meeting and did something that terrified her. She admitted she couldn't do everything alone and asked for help. I've been micromanaging every detail because I was afraid of failing, she confessed to her 5 team members who'd gathered in the conference room. But I'm exhausted, overwhelmed, and probably making mistakes because I'm too tired to think clearly. I need each of you to take full ownership of your areas without waiting for my approval on every decision. I trust you. I hired you because you're talented and capable. So let's divide responsibilities and start working as a real team, instead of me being a bottleneck. The relief on everyone's faces was immediate and visible. Her logistics coordinator admitted she'd had ideas for streamlining vendor management, but was afraid to speak up. Her marketing specialist had connections with influencers who could amplify their reach, but thought Rebecca wanted to control all communications personally. Within an hour, they'd redistributed tasks based on individual strengths, created communication protocols that didn't require Rebecca's constant input, and established a support system where team members could make decisions independently. Rebecca left that meeting feeling lighter than she had in weeks. With the burden properly distributed, Rebecca finally had time to address something she'd been neglecting: her relationship with her children. She'd been so consumed with proving herself at work that she'd barely seen her daughter Sophia and son Miguel in weeks. They were being raised primarily by her mother, while Rebecca chased corporate success, repeating the exact pattern she'd always sworn she'd avoid. That Friday evening, Rebecca left the office at 5 o'clock for the first time since starting at Chen Industries. She picked up her kids from school personally, took them for pizza at their favorite restaurant, and actually listened when they talked about their days, their friends, their worries. "Mommy, are you okay?" 10-year-old Sophia asked with concern beyond her years. "You seem sad all the time now, even when you smile." The observation broke Rebecca's heart because it was absolutely true. She'd been so focused on external success that she'd lost the internal joy that made success meaningful in the first place. "I'm going to be better," Rebecca promised, hugging both children tightly. "I got caught up trying to prove something to people who don't matter and forgot about the people who matter most. You two and Grandma. That changes now. No more missing dinners or bedtimes unless it's absolutely unavoidable." Miguel, age 7, looked skeptical. "You always say that, but then work calls and you leave again." His words stung because they reflected a pattern Rebecca had created through her own choices. She pulled out her phone, opened her calendar app, and showed them something that made their eyes widen with surprise. She'd blocked out every evening from 6 to 9 for family time, non-negotiable, and every Saturday for Kids' Day. No exceptions. "See? It's in my work calendar now. That means my team knows I'm unavailable during these times, unless there's a genuine emergency. You two are more important than any festival or promotion or proving myself to colleagues." I almost forgot that, but I remember now. Sophia and Miguel hugged her so tightly she could barely breathe, and Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face as she realized how close she'd come to sacrificing what truly mattered for corporate validation. The final month before the festival flew by in a blur of coordinated activity, but this time Rebecca maintained the balance she'd promised her children. She worked intensely during business hours, delegated effectively to her capable team, and protected her family time with fierce determination. When a vendor called during dinner, she let it go to voicemail and called back later. When Gregory tried to schedule a Saturday meeting, she politely declined and suggested Monday instead. When Marcus invited her to a networking event on Wednesday evening, she thanked him, but explained it conflicted with Miguel's school play. To her surprise, nobody criticized or questioned her boundaries. In fact, most people respected her more for maintaining them. Marcus even sent a text saying, "Good for you. Leaders who can't balance work and life eventually burn out and become useless to everyone. You're modeling the culture I want for this entire company." His support reinforced that she'd made the right choice by refusing to sacrifice her humanity for corporate achievement. She could be a dedicated professional and a present mother. The two weren't mutually exclusive, despite what hustle culture preached. 1 week before the festival, disaster struck in a form nobody had anticipated. A major hurricane formed off the coast, and weather models predicted it would hit the city exactly on the scheduled event date. Rebecca stared at the meteorological reports in horror as months of planning threatened to collapse in a single day. They couldn't hold an outdoor festival during a hurricane. People would be injured or killed, but postponing would mean renegotiating hundreds of contracts, rescheduling dozens of volunteers and performers, and potentially losing donor commitments that were tied to the specific date. Insurance would cover some losses, but not the reputational damage of a failed event. Rebecca called an emergency meeting with her team and the executive leadership to discuss options. "We could postpone 2 weeks and hope the weather cooperates," suggested her logistics coordinator. "Or we could pivot to a virtual event and try to salvage what we can online," offered her marketing specialist. Both options felt like failure to Rebecca, who'd promised to deliver something unprecedented and transformative. She looked at Marcus, who sat quietly listening to the debate with an unreadable expression. "What would you do?" Rebecca asked him directly, needing guidance from someone with decades more experience navigating crises. Marcus smiled slightly and shook his head. "This is your project, Rebecca. I'm here to support whatever decision you make, but I'm not going to make it for you. Leadership means choosing between imperfect options and accepting responsibility for the outcomes. What does your gut tell you?" His refusal to rescue her was initially frustrating, but Rebecca understood the lesson he was teaching. She couldn't run to him every time something went wrong. She had to develop her own judgment and stand behind her own decisions. She looked at the weather reports again, studying the hurricane's projected path and timeline with intense focus. Something about the models didn't sit right with her. The storm was moving faster than typical hurricanes, and the cone of uncertainty was actually quite wide. There was a real possibility it would shift direction or speed up enough to pass through before the festival date. It was a gamble, but Rebecca had been gambling her entire life, betting on better jobs, better apartments, better futures for her children. This was just another calculated risk. "We're not postponing or pivoting," Rebecca announced with more confidence than she felt. "We're proceeding as planned, but implementing comprehensive contingency protocols. We'll secure additional covered areas, move critical activities under tents, prepare indoor backup locations for medical screenings and workshops, and create communication plans to update attendees in real time if conditions change. We'll also establish clear safety thresholds. If wind speeds exceed certain levels or flooding becomes dangerous, we evacuate immediately and trigger our postponement protocol. But I believe this hurricane will either shift course or pass through faster than predicted, and we'll have beautiful weather on festival day." The room fell silent as everyone processed her decision. Some faces showed doubt, others showed respect for her willingness to take risks. Marcus leaned back in his chair with an expression of satisfaction and pride. "All right then. Rebecca's made her call. Let's execute her contingency plan and prepare for every possible scenario. "This is going to be interesting." His confidence in her decision strengthened Rebecca's resolve, even as anxiety churned in her stomach about what would happen if she was wrong. The next 5 days were the most stressful of Rebecca's entire life, as she monitored weather updates every hour while simultaneously finalizing festival preparations. The hurricane dominated news coverage, and speculation swirled about whether Chen Industries would cancel their high-profile community event. Competitors and critics openly predicted failure, with several business bloggers writing premature obituaries for Rebecca's career. "Unqualified executive makes catastrophic weather gamble," read one headline. "Chen Industries charity festival doomed by hurricane," declared another. The negative press was relentless, and Rebecca's phone exploded with calls from concerned donors, worried volunteers, and media outlets seeking comments. She responded to each inquiry with calm professionalism, explaining their contingency plans and expressing confidence in their weather analysis. Privately, she second-guessed herself constantly. What if she was wrong? What if the hurricane hit directly and people got hurt? What if this single decision destroyed everything she'd built and validated every critic who said she didn't belong in corporate leadership? The doubt was suffocating, but she couldn't show weakness now. Her team was counting on her confidence to maintain their own morale during the uncertainty. 2 days before the festival, the impossible happened. The hurricane suddenly shifted direction and accelerated exactly as Rebecca had predicted. It passed 200 miles offshore and moved through the region a full day earlier than meteorologists had initially forecasted. By Friday evening, the skies were clear. The wind had died down, and the weather forecast for Saturday showed sunny conditions with temperatures in the mid-70s. Rebecca watched the updated predictions on her office computer screen and felt her knees buckle with relief. She'd been right. Her gamble had paid off. The festival would proceed as planned under perfect conditions. Her phone immediately lit up with congratulatory messages from team members, donors, and supporters who'd been holding their breath alongside her. Marcus sent a simple text that meant more than all the others combined. "That's what leadership looks like. You trusted your judgment under pressure and delivered. Tomorrow's going to be special." Rebecca allowed herself exactly 5 minutes to cry tears of relief and exhaustion before pulling herself together. They had a festival to execute in less than 24 hours, and her work was far from finished. But for the first time since accepting Marcus's offer months ago, Rebecca felt completely certain she belonged exactly where she was, leading with courage, integrity, and the unwavering belief that impossible things could become possible with enough determination and heart.